This is Karen Gordon, the Self-Healing Coach.
And this is Ann Baroque, Certified Nutritional Consultant and Naturopath.
So, Ann, I was thinking that today we would talk about the 5 biggest challenges of implementing your recovery plan and how to solve them so that you can ensure that, the people that are on your plan are having, the most success possible with it. And I know of several, I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who read my blog and my own thoughts about what the biggest issues have been for me. And, we talked a little bit about this already and, narrowed it down to the top 5. So do you want me to shout out what they are?
Sure, start with the first one and then we'll break it down.
Okay, so changing and sticking with an anti-inflammatory diet when you're symptomatic.
Okay, well, I think let's do a little precursor here is that one thing is I don't like the word diet itself. And yes, I'm going to change the nutrition. I'm going to suggest that you pull inflammatory foods. But I think the perspective and the perception needs to change because then this makes it doable. It's not about deprivation. Look, I wish I could give you brownies and then say you could walk out of a wheelchair. I would love to give you, your coffee every day and say, hey, it's not going to make an impact on being more acidic in the body. But the reality is when you're dealing with an autoimmune condition, this is something that's been 10 to 15 years in the making. And so if you're not shifting the food, then you're not going to see the changes. And you really need to make deep cellular responses. So the first thing is get rid of that you're depriving yourself and taking away things that you love. And try to shift your perception into, I'm basically changing my food to remove infection and inflammation. And think in small increments. So when you're symptomatic, I find I think it's much easier to stay with it because you want to be out of pain, you want more mobility, you might want your numbness and tingling to go away, you might want your skin to clear up, whatever you're dealing with as far as autoimmune. So you're more, motivated to do it.
Right.
So the key with that is thinking in small increments and get away from feeling that you're deprived. So I tell people, think 30-day increments. And within the first 3 months, 90 days, you will see shifts and changes. And usually by then, you're motivated to stick with it and to continue to implement what you're doing.
Right. And so, the flip side of that is when you're not symptomatic and when you're feeling healthy, I know for myself, my memory is so bad, it can be like 2 days of feeling good, and I'm like, I'm great, I'm fine, I can eat whatever I want, I can have dessert. And so talk to me about how can somebody stick to the diet, how do they motivate themselves to stay on the diet when they're feeling
when they're not symptomatic. Yeah. I think that's actually the most critical because I see many people in my office become asymptomatic, and that does not mean you put an autoimmune condition to bed. You need to secure that for a while. And I actually feel that when you initially start to clean out, you're removing years of infection and inflammation, so you're stripping and you're getting rid of. And then you're getting to become a clean running machine so that when you're putting all this healthy stuff in, the body can actually go and repair in certain places. So when you feel asymptomatic, I think is when you're doing the deepest repair. And that's actually when you want to stick to the diet the most. Because if you start going, hey, I feel great, I'm going to start drinking a glass of wine again, I'm going to eat chocolate every night, I'm going to have a ding dong, whatever you like to eat. The point is that you're going to basically stop that great deep repair, put the skid marks on, and start to move sideways. And if you don't clean it up, you start to move backwards again. So you want to remember that when you're asymptomatic is when you're doing deep, deep cellular repair, and you want to go get even more excited about that, but you want to take more time to solidify it.
I'm so happy you brought up that point because I know that you said that to me before, and I remember you said it to me like 2 years ago, and it's so critical because I think that most people just don't understand that point, and I think that alone, if you go, wow, I can actually really kick this thing if I stay on the diet and I do what I need to do, take my supplements when I'm asymptomatic, it's so much more motivating. And then if you take that and then you go, oh, and also if I start eating whatever I want, I'm going to end up having a relapse of some sort, which, is fresh in my mind because that's what just happened to me. And I have been saying, I said in, recently on my blog that, me having a relapse wasn't a sign that your program doesn't work. Me having a relapse was proof that it does work, because I had totally abandoned it for like a few months prior. I wasn't taking my supplements. I wasn't really on the diet. And that's what happened to me. And so I, as horrible as it was to get sick again, there was a part of me that was kind of like a little part of me that's like, yay, I proved to myself that it works.
Right. Well, and I think a good point to this is that it's not just about 3 months of cleaning out and the body's reverted autoimmune conditions. As I said, these are about 10 to 15 years in the making. And I think, to be honest with you, it takes a good 5 to 10 years to make sure that you've completely put this thing to bed. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get asymptomatic very quickly, but that does not mean that the switches are all firing the correct way. And so people have to realize that you're making a lifestyle change. Because if you think diet in your head, that feels deprivation, short term. I don't want people to think that way. I want you to think lifestyle change, and that, you're moving into a place to really nurture the body and give it that environment for as long as possible. And it varies, because some autoimmune conditions can actually get away with a little bit more if there's a little bit of falling off, let's say, the wagon, where some conditions really can't tolerate that. So it depends on the individual. It depends on the type of autoimmune condition.
Right. So, okay. So how can somebody, and this is the third item on our 5 biggest challenges, how do you handle social events? How do you go over to your families for the holidays? How do you go out to dinner? How do you go to a party and, not eat the corn chips and the salsa?
You starve. You don't eat anything. No. I get this question all the time, because I actually have clients that never even eat a meal at home. You do the best you can do. If once we get into the actual webinar and I start to break down food groups and which ones are the most toxic, you'll learn how to pick and choose. Because, if you're at a party and there's barbecue sauce in the chicken, fine, scrape it off, but don't dip every bite in the sugary sauce. You're at a Chinese restaurant. Don't get a sweet and sour dish, maybe get a steamed dish, and you get brown rice versus white rice.
Right.
If traces come in here and there, you're going to survive. The body's still going to heal. As long as you're working with the big 4 components, which are alcohol, refined sugar, gluten, and dairy products. If you can stay off the big bullets, and then within that try to do the best you can do, you're fine. And if really you're stuck and all there is pizza, well, maybe have 1 slice versus 5 slices and get back on what you instead. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Because you don't want to feel that the program makes you feel more stressed out. You want to feel that you're rolling into a lifestyle, and when you do go out and there are family functions or there are holidays, that either you do a little bit or you make the modifications where you can and you move on. You don't want it to be a big deal like, oh my God, I can't go to so-and-so's house because there's nothing to eat. You do what you can do.
Right. And and part of it is willpower and discipline, because, you can go over and you can go over for the holidays to your family's house, and you can have 1 slice of cake, but then the next day, at least for me, then the next day I have a sugar craving. Once I've introduced it, all of a sudden I want more. And then you really have to have the discipline to go, no, I'm not doing this.
And you do. I think it's also, you have to realize health is a choice. It does take tenacity and discipline to be able to do what people are wanting to do in dealing with autoimmune conditions. We're not dealing with a little sinus infection. Right. I'm not dealing with a little reflux. These are quickly things that can be rectified. So it's the broader perspective, taking it a day at a time, but really realizing what is your mission, what is your commitment to yourself. And when it comes down to food, we want food to be about fuel. We do not want it to pacify emotions, whether they're negative or positive. Right. So that's part of an internal thing that we'll cover greatly in this webinar, because a lot of people use food as an emotional pacifier, and I did. I was a sugar addict my whole life until I got cleaned up and, basically got well and all that good stuff. So that's something we'll go into in depth about. Absolutely.
Okay, so how about the time commitment? Like you said, a lot of your clients, they've never even, eaten a meal, made a meal at home. So all of a sudden there's all these restrictions, and there's a very specific diet that we need to follow, and it doesn't have to, but it usually does require food shopping and some planning and, you know, more of a time investment in how we eat. So how do you integrate that?
I say that you're worth it. It's you know, once again, we want the magic fix. We want a magic pill,
Right.
a magic whatever, and it's not going to happen that way. So I think that as you start to get the foundational steps and you integrate them slowly, you build on it, and before you know it, you're living this lifestyle, and it doesn't feel so cumbersome to walk into. But really, it does mean that you have to put yourself on the list first, and if that means on a Sunday you have to prepare a few things for the week, you do it.
Yeah.
If it means you get up 3 minutes earlier to exercise, to be able to make sure you have a good breakfast, then you do that. So the thing is that you have to make the choice, and then you have to back it up with consistency. So it does come down to that discipline factor, and it comes down to feeling that you're worth it, because no one else is going to take care of you but you. And you're in the driver's seat, and the more that you feel this is a want versus a have to, it becomes easier, and it doesn't feel like a challenge. It feels like, oh my God, because your body's going to give you back results, and then you're going to feed off that, so it doesn't feel like you're pushing the snow, you know, the snowball up the mountain.
Right.
It's going to feel like, wow, it's actually rolling off of me, and I have more mobility, and I can think straight, I can articulate, I can move, or my skin's clearing up, or whatever you have going on. You start to see the results, and it all makes sense. It doesn't feel like such a challenge with your food.
Right, and the fact is that, you know, if you have an autoimmune illness, it's been years in the making. So it's going to take several years to turn it around. And that's, you know, it's a hard thing it's a hard pill to swallow, no pun intended, when, you know, when we're living in a culture that's so instant gratification, to go, you know, if I really want to heal myself, like really, really at the root cause, it's not going to happen overnight, and I'm going to have to invest time, and it's a commitment, and it's going to take discipline. Okay, so financial commitment, how does that play into this lifestyle change?
Well, there is one, and I'd like to say that, you know, it's not, you could stay at the same budget, but I think that that's unrealistic. I try to give many people as many options as possible to certain supplements they can get on places like Amazon.com and Vitacost. So I'm always conscious of the cost involved, but to get yourself well is going to take some commitment, because unfortunately the healthier foods cost more because they're not as such demand. And so there's no way around that except to look for locals, farmers markets, some of these online sites that we'll go into and things. So there is a commitment to invest into your health. And that means there will be more money paid out for food. There will be supplementation, but you might also be paying high costs for pharmaceuticals, and as you start to feel better, you might be making different choices about those. So, you know, there is that investment. There's no way around it, because it takes those factors to get someone well.
Right.
So,
and I mean, you know, when you're sick, it's tough, because, you know, if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. But when you're sick, it's like, what wouldn't you spend to get well? I mean, it's just like nothing else matters.
Absolutely, because if you don't have your health, you don't have anything, and, you know, then to even take care of your family or do your creative endeavors or your work. So, you know, it's usually going to become the number one priority, and hopefully you would feel, you know, the need to invest in yourself as best you can.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, you also have to think of food as your medicine. I mean, really, your recovery program, food is the medicine that we're using to get well. And that's, I think, a key way to look at it.
It's very simple. Trash in equates to trash out. And there's no way to get the trash out if you don't put better food in. There's just no way.
Yeah. So, awesome. Well, I think that we kind of covered the 5 biggest challenges of implementing the recovery plan. And obviously, we're going to go into a lot more detail in the actual Autoimmune Warrior Bootcamp. But changing and sticking to the diet when you're symptomatic, sticking with the diet when you're not symptomatic, how to manage your social activities, the time commitment, and the financial commitment, those are all huge issues. And, you know, they can all be talked about for many hours, I'm sure. So, and we'll have a lot more time to talk about that on the actual webinar. So, till next time, I'll talk to you soon, Ann.
Bye.